learned builds a lot of character. It's definitely a necessary component to get anything, worthwhile off the ground. I don't regret it for a second. My mentality was always, to pitch in. I had the skill set. I started my company was a technical company. And we started programming. So the very first product that was released was a result of, my typing and my programming. And I maintained that skill set for many, many years. Not for the entirety of the company. It got to a point where the technology outgrew my ability to keep up with it because I had so many other challenges to deal with. But until that happened, for the first, I would say 10 to probably 15 years, I was down in the trenches with my team. And I enjoyed, pitching in when an extra set of hands was needed, when there was extra tasks to be performed on various projects. I really enjoyed, getting down into the trenches.
Hey everyone, welcome to Flow Over Fear. I'm really excited you're here today because I have a good friend who I met a number of months ago in a program called Heroic Public Speaking. And I learned we were kind of two birds of a feather because we have a lot of the same kind of adventurous spirit and we've been through a lot of similar things. And man, his story is incredible. And his name is Steven Pivnik. He is a sought after keynote speaker, best-selling author, a business advisor, and a serial entrepreneur specializing in information and technology market. He grew his last company, Binary Tree, to over 200 employees across 12 countries before a successful exit to a $4 billion competitor. And Steven is an incredible story. His incredible story is one that is full of adventure, and we'll get into a lot of that today. And it began as an immigrant from Eastern Europe in the former Soviet Union and ultimately led him to the finish line of the Ironman World Championship and beyond. His other adventures have included completing the Ultraman in Florida, multiple ultra marathons of distances up to 100 miles, and summiting some of the most challenging summits in the world. And when he's not on the keynote stage or climbing one of the 7 summits, Steven advises other founders and entrepreneurs looking for similar corporate growth or sale. And his new book, which I had the opportunity to read before it came out, is called Built to Finish, and it's available now, and it's really, really good. Steven, welcome to the show. I'm so glad you're here, man.
Thank you, Adam. I'm blushing from that introduction. Thank you so much.
Well, I mean, it's funny when we hear our introductions, when we've done all of these things, it's almost like just one of those things where just our world flashes before our eyes and we see all of the things we've experienced and how it started for you is really inspiring because, you came from a background which was really challenging in and of itself. And I'd love to hear kind of your story from childhood. I want to start there because coming
Sure.
as an immigrant from Eastern Europe during a really, really tumultuous time and coming into the United States, I mean, that's not something a lot of people experience. And I'd love to hear how that kind of shaped your future. Can you kind of get into that a little bit?
Sure. I'm not sure if I actually have the actual memories of the events of the actual immigration because it happened when it started when I was 2 years old and it ended when I was 3, when we finally ended up in Brooklyn, New York, from the former Soviet Union, now Odessa, Ukraine, which it is now. So I'm not sure if I actually remember these events or if I actually formed these memories based on the numerous stories that I've heard over the years. But yeah, it was some pretty tumultuous times. My family's Jewish. There was a lot of anti-Semitism in the former Soviet Union. We weren't allowed to. We weren't specifically very religious Jews, but we like to practice, the major holidays and a lot of the customs. The straw that broke the camel's back was a woman walked into a store and broke a glass bottle over my grandmother's head and calling her a rotten Jew as she, ran out of the store. So my grandfather basically said that's it, enough's enough. We're going to go look for a better life and started the process of getting us out of there. The journey was long. We went from Odessa to Austria, from Austria to Rome, Italy. And we lived in Rome, Italy for over just about 6 months because Rome at the time was the center for all immigration into the United States. So we waited for our official papers to get finalized in Rome. And then when we finally got the go ahead, we were actually given several options. We could have gone to Canada. We could have gone to Australia. We could have gone to Israel or several spots in the US. And my family chose Brooklyn, New York, and got on a plane, went to JFK and got sent over to an apartment in Brighton Beach. So it was
Wow.
a pretty long journey, and life began in earnest for us in the U.S.
So what led to the decision to come to New York instead of Canada or Australia or any of those other places? Was there something that
I
drove
think
you
that
there?
the biggest reason was my parents and my grandparents knew one or two other couples that were already in New York, and we didn't really
Hmm.
have any other acquaintances in the other locations. So people were saying, "Hey, we're in New York. The water's fine. Come on in." So
Nice.
we chose New York. Otherwise, I
Awesome.
would have been talking with a funny accent right now.
Well, that's I know it's fascinating. And have you so growing up in New York in that time, kind of coming over with the shirts on your back and everything like that? How was that growing up? What did you learn from that experience of growing up in New York and kind of being that first generation
Yeah,
in the United
I
States?
think that's where I got my work ethic from because we didn't have a penny to our name. But
Mm-hmm.
there were plenty of jobs. My father was a mechanic. He was an air conditioning mechanic, and then slowly but surely migrated his skill set into automobile mechanics. My grandfather was a bus driver for a Jewish school in Borough Park, Brooklyn, and I saw them, get up to work every single day and come home late. So I
Mm-hmm.
firmly believe, that's where I got my work ethic from. There was no such thing as sick days. It was, work from sunrise to sunset, to put food on the table and to provide for the family, which they did really, really well. I don't remember hurting. We weren't rich at all, but I
Yeah.
don't remember hurting for anything. We always had food on the table. We always had shelter. We always had clothes. A lot of it was from charity, from various Jewish organizations, but a lot of
Mm-hmm.
it was from the blood, sweat, and tears that my father and grandfather, and then later grandmother and mother, put in to just to make ends meet.
Yeah. And how with your grandparents, I know you'd mentioned in the book that they really shaped a lot of your framework, obviously your work ethic. Is there anything else you feel that you got from them from that experience that helped you become who you are today, or any fond memories that you have of your grandparents in particular?
Sure. I mean, my parents were very, very social. They made a lot of friends,
Mhm.
and a lot of, friends immigrated after us, and then they made new friends in Brooklyn. So they were super social. They went out every single weekend, which is where I get a lot of my, I guess, social activities and
Right.
social hobbies from as well. But the best part about that was they dropped my sister off at my grandparents' apartment every single Friday after work, and we weren't picked up until Sunday. So we got to spend from Friday night to Sunday night with my grandparents. And being typical grandparents, they spoil their grandchildren. We
Yeah.
lived right on or they lived right on the beach in Brooklyn. So in the summers, we went to the beach every Saturday and every Sunday. In the winters, they took us to a myriad of different activities, from roller skating to ice skating, to shopping, different things. And they were like the matriarch and patriarch of the family. They loved each other, and it showed in droves. So we definitely saw what love was like. And they cared for their kids and their grandkids tremendously, and we saw what it's like to lead a family, not just a household, but to lead a family. And
Mhm.
they just set an incredible example for me and my sister on how to do so when it was time for us to build our own families.
I love that. And you mentioned kind of the work ethic that you got, and it shows. I mean, throughout the book, built to finish, that you're just releasing, that you talk a lot about the work ethic, the grit, the drive, the grind, as you call it,
Sure.
and how that was kind of imprinted in you early on. And while I think it was when you were in high school, there were periods of times where you saw other people, other kids enjoying the activities that they did in high school and all that, while you were working, the job and trying to make money to support yourself and the family. How uh, is do you still feel the same way about that work ethic? Has it evolved, or do you regret any of that, kind of like just working really hard and grinding? Or how would you reflect on that grind today in terms of
No,
what it
I
means
think
to
the
you?
grind builds a lot of character. It's definitely
Yeah.
a necessary component to get anything, worthwhile off the ground. I don't regret it for a second. My mentality was always, to pitch in. I had the skill set. I mean, I started my company was a technical company, and we started programming. So the very first product that was released was a result of my typing and my programming, and I maintained that skill set for many many years. Not for the entirety of the company. It got to a point where the technology outgrew my ability to keep up with it because I had so many other challenges to deal with. But until that happened, for the first, I would say 10 to probably 15 years, I was down in the trenches with my team. And I enjoyed, pitching in when an extra set of hands was needed, when there was an, extra, tasks to be performed on various projects. I really enjoyed, getting down into the trenches. And I think that differentiates, some leaders from others. And that's not to say that there's also a lot to be said for delegation, right? Right now in my advisory role, I highly, highly suggest that CEOs and founders delegate more because, like myself, founders sometimes have a hard time letting go, and you got to find. And there's no right time. There's no perfect right time, right? It all
Right.
depends on the situation, depends on the company, depends on the growth rate. There's a lot of factors that go into it, but there does come a time when delegation becomes much more important than rolling up your sleeves and pitching in, and helping entrepreneurs and founders find that right time is something that I really enjoy doing.
Yeah, and that's something I honestly struggle with too. It is, running a company is that balance between digging in and showing the team that you're engaged and wanting to be involved, but also knowing your role, knowing your place, knowing that your responsibility is to kind of look at the high level stuff and really delegate there.
Sure.
Are there any tools or tips that you have from your experience on how to balance that, on how to balance the engagement versus the high level, delegation?
I think it becomes a lot easier once you have a lot of confidence and trust in the people that are around you.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of the times when you find a founder or an owner, digging in much deeper than they really should, is because they really don't trust that they can hand this off to somebody and for it to be done as well as they would do it. The old
Yeah.
adage, if you want it done right, you have to do it yourself. If if that's true in your company, then that's probably a symptom of you not having the right people around you. So a
Mm-hmm.
CEO or founder, should be responsible mainly for strategy and high level vision, and the actual execution of that should be delegated to others. And if you can't, then it's a sign that the team around you needs to be looked at.
Yeah. Was that a role that you enjoyed? The idea, the running of the business and the building of it, because you've since obviously sold it and exited and doing all of this other stuff, writing a book and all these things. Is that something you're going to miss? Is it something you're going to want to go back to? What are your thoughts on that?
It's interesting. When the exit first occurred and I sold the company, I was incredibly relieved. I was obviously very happy about the
Yeah.
outcome, and I was super proud of my team for accomplishing, what we accomplished in the marketplace. And you know
Mhm.
what? It's very, very similar to finishing a race. The second you cross the finish line after a long endurance event, especially with some of the crazy things that I do, I mean, all you want to do is, curl up, go to sleep, and wake up 4 days later.
Right.
But you know what? When the dust settles and the cramps subside and the muscles start working again, you start looking around saying, okay, and this happens every single time. But before the end of a race, I'm like, I don't need to do this anymore. I'm 50, what am I, 54 years old now. Enough of this torture to your body. And then it never fails. 3 days later, I'm looking for the next challenge and I'm signing up for something else. But to answer your question regarding the business, I loved growing the company. It was fantastic to see year after year after year of consecutive growth for the business. And when we were done, again, it was super rewarding. It was for me personally because I wasn't part of the sale. It became eerily quiet. I'm going from running a
Hmm.
million miles an hour in this business to having no access to my email, my calendar, contacts. The phone stops ringing. It was eerie, to say the least.
Yeah.
It's been just over 3 years now. I think the itch is starting a little bit. Right now, I'm just living vicariously through other founders and helping them from an advisory perspective. And I love going to meetings. I love the energy. I love their challenge. It's almost like being a grandparent and getting kids for the weekend and having to deal with them. But the best part about it is you get to give them back and you get to go on with your life. So not that I want my clients to have problems, but every growing business has challenges. I love digging in, and I get the energy from that. But I'm slowly but surely starting to miss having that that same type of energy from my own creation. So I think I said this in the book. Never say never. But right now there's no plans for new but never say never.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I love that philosophy of never saying never, because you never know what's around the bend. And if you're going to close the door to other opportunities that might exist for you in the future that you might really enjoy, then it's just, that's never good. And I think, so I'm always curious about that, because I've talked to a lot of entrepreneurs, CEOs who do get that itch, who kind of go back to it, who start multiple businesses. That entrepreneurial bug just doesn't leave. What was the original, impetus for that entrepreneurial itch that you had? Because you were working, you were from the book, you were working in other companies, 4 other companies. What led you to make that switch to, going into starting your own business and wanting to pursue that? And kind of tell us about those first few years, if you don't mind.
Sure. So I started my career first as a programmer, and I was working for a publishing company called Reader's Digest at the time, and that was great experience. I was super young. I was learning a lot. Working in a big professional environment. Then I got a job at another biggish company, the equivalent of a Macy's today. I think it was called Mercantile Stores. And after I outgrew that job, I got a job as a consultant. And the consulting company placed me at their client, I believe at the time was American Express. And I started learning the financials behind this business. So I'm just picking numbers here. Let's say they were billing me out at $100 an hour, and they were paying me, say, $80 an hour. So they were making $20 margin for every hour of my work, but they weren't adding any value whatsoever. And I just felt that was wrong. Again, maybe it was ignorance. I mean, every staffing agency deserves to get paid because this is what they do. They had a need, and they found they sourced that need, and they should get paid for it. So, but being the naive person that I was, and maybe it's a good thing, I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. So I said, if I want to do this, I want to do something very, very similar. I want to make margin I want to make my full billing. I want to take home my full billing rate is what I said to myself. And when I expand these projects into larger projects and I bring on additional staff to fill the requirements, I'm going to make margin on that staff, but I'm going to add value from a project management perspective, either from a client services perspective. I'm going to provide training to the employees. I'm going to provide benefits to the employees. So I'm going to treat my employees differently than I was treated by this consulting company that placed me on this project. So that was kind of the vision. I'm going to do what I'm doing on a larger scale, but a lot differently, and add more value on both ends of the equation. So the company was started as a consulting organization, just doing custom application development work for large customers in the Wall Street area in New York. So that was the origins of the business, and slowly but surely, we grew to about 50, maybe 30 to 40 employees, again, doing what I just described, custom application development work for unique requirements. And then a bank, JP Morgan, approached us and said, hey, you guys are building a reputation for good custom development work. We need this custom tool developed to help us convert email data, because we're moving from one email system to another. And we want to make sure that all of the inbox, the calendar, the contacts, all the folders are synchronized when we move over to this new system. So I looked up over at my partners and said, that's the most boring project I've ever heard of. At the time, But we were consultants, right? We would trade time for dollars, and we didn't like to say no to work. At the
Yeah.
time, I had a pretty long commute. I was living in New Jersey with my family, and the business was in Manhattan. And I had an hour and a half, each way train ride, and laptops were a thing. So I said, you know
Yeah.
what? We don't have anybody available for this project. I'll just do it myself over my commute over the next couple of months. So over the next couple of months, wrote the code, delivered to the customer. The customer was happy. And that tiny little program to convert email data mushroomed into an entire suite of products that really helped facilitate the age of enterprise email systems in the 90s. So that was
Wow.
the beginnings of the company.
That's incredible. Yeah, it's and I heard a few things there that are really important. I think to touch on for the audience who may be thinking of making that leap to entrepreneurship. And I know that there's many out there, but that first was like, where can I add value? That there
Right.
may be areas out there where there's not value being added that you can add a significant value. And it sounds like that was almost the platform on which you were able to make that growth in your company, was just like you found a way to add value. And then the other part was you built reputation. You built a reputation for that service, for the experience that the customer needed. That's really powerful. Do you feel like those are the primary elements, or were there other things that led to that growth that you saw in those early
No,
days?
it definitely did. Adding value and exceeding customer expectations is a huge,
Mhm.
and I think that should be a foundation for anybody that has a company or is thinking of starting a company. There's a
Yeah.
great book that I read, I think called Loveability. It
Mm.
talks about making sure that the customer loves every single touch point with your company. From the time they first see your website to the time they contact a salesperson to the time, let's say, they get a product demonstration if it's a technology, or maybe they get an evaluation copy if you're in the manufacturing space, to calling customer support, to calling the renewal representative for their subscription renewal. You need to make sure that there's lovability from the
Mhm.
customer's perspective to your customer, and then you're gonna build customers for life if you can achieve that.
That's incredible. I love Ability book. I have to look that up because that sounds like something that should be a read for anybody that's getting into business, finding out how that is. So,
Yeah.
thank you for that recommendation. So later on, obviously, fast forward ahead, you built a business. Now you're on the path to selling it. How did that come to be, and what led to the decision to you to sell it and not just keep running it and building it?
Sure. So one of the many mistakes that I've made in building this business was we were kind of a victim of our own success.
Hmm.
We created software and professional services that were around specific projects. Even though we did a lot of other things, and I don't want to take away value from other products, the core of our business was helping companies convert email data. So you go
Hmm.
from one platform to another. You go from an on-premise email server to the cloud, which is continues to be a big thing, and it's amazing that still many companies don't have their email in the cloud yet.
Right.
But it was project-based software. In the software world, that's really rare because most software you purchase, you subscribe to, and you use
Hmm.
all the time. Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel, Google Mail, any other product you use continuously. Our products and services were project-based. So
Yeah.
we started every January with zero revenue.
Hmm.
And we by the time we ended the company, the time I sold the company, we were at over $40 million of revenue. But think of having to start at zero every single
Yeah.
year, and then to sell
Yeah.
more than you sold last year, and do that
Right.
over and over and over. Talk about the grind. And we got it done. We miraculously grew for 26 years in a row.
Yeah.
And it's not that I lost any confidence in our ability to continue to grow, but it just got to such a scale where it became a little bit scary. I know
Yeah.
I know for a fact that we could have continued to grow it, but something just clicked in my mind, and I said it's time.
Yeah. So the idea of not having that recurring revenue model was a little bit scary. That was one of the
Yeah,
impetuses
it,
to that.
it, it was
Yeah.
it was really scary. And again, I had
Yeah.
had all the confidence in the world that we would continue to grow, and we did because
Hmm.
from the time I made the decision to sell to the time we sold was just over 3 years.
Yeah.
And guess what? During those 3 years, we we grew and we grew and we grew. And I think,
Right.
and I know we would have continued to grow, but that was just one of the many things that contributed to me just saying, you know what, it's time to realize the value for me and my family, to realize the value from this all this work that I and my team did, and the
Yeah.
sacrifices that were put forward for all these years.
Yeah. So that's and then as you look to sell it, were you actively approaching competitors to buy, or did they approach you? How did that look? Were you attractive enough that they were going to be looking for you, or were you seeking them out?
Yeah, we had some unsolicited offers in the
Hmm.
past, which weren't attractive enough. When it was time to finally officially, when I made the decision to officially sell, we ended up interviewing several investment bankers. We ended up picking one out of Pennsylvania, which I highly recommend.
Hmm.
Fairmount Partners, they were phenomenal with us, and they actually started a formal process of a formal go-to-market process where they come up with all the necessary literature to bring a company to market, and they propose your company to potential buyers, and we ended up selling. So that process, we executed that process and ended up selling to our biggest competitor.
That's awesome. Well, congratulations on that. I know that's just a huge success to build a company from scratch and build it to a point where you could sell to a multi-billion-dollar company. It's just incredible. An example
Thank
of
you.
how like that positive work ethic can drive forward to that kind of thing. I hope everybody can learn a lesson from that. And it sounds like that lesson of the grind and, even extended beyond obviously your career, but into endurance sport, and starting to get into Ironman triathlons and ultra endurance sports. And I mean, yeah, your resume is incredible on that on that front. So but I want to get into that because that's exciting to me too. How did you get started with endurance sport? You start your book off with talking about the triathlon stuff. Can you kind of share about how you caught the bug and developed how you did?
Sure. Yeah, so as I was approaching, I call it my midlife crisis. I don't know if 40 is midlife, but I hope not. But as I was approaching 40, I was looking at my parents and my grandparents who had it all.
Yeah.
They had cancer, high blood pressure, diabetes, strokes, you name it. My parents, God bless them, and grandparents had it. And I said, hey,
Hmm.
I've got some really bad genes in my body, and I need to do something about it. So it was weighing heavily on me. Around
Yeah.
the same exact time, I was at a dinner party when one of my executives at work threw a small dinner party, and one of them told me that one of our employees, her name was Rita, just ran a triathlon. And I was just blown away by the fact that a mere mortal, one of my employees, ran a triathlon. This was my ignorance about the sport. I thought triathlons was an Olympic event, and you have to be like this chiseled athlete to participate in a triathlon. How does a mere mortal do this? So first thing Monday morning, I bring up Rita, get her into my office. Hopefully, I didn't scare her too much. Like, why does Steven want to see me? I'm
Right.
like, tell me about the triathlon and how do you sign up for one? So there's a website called beginnertriathlete.com. You
Hmm.
can sort by location and by length of race. You could pick a local race, and anybody, meaning anybody, there's no qualification process, can sign up for any race. And then you train and you show up and you race. And when you finish, you're a triathlete. And that's exactly what
Yeah.
happened. And when I crossed that finish line, I'm like, oh my God, I love this sport.
I love that. Yeah, and beginner triathlete. I remember that website well when I was starting out too, and it was almost the antithesis of slow twitch, which was like the scary version of like this is the
Yes.
that yeah. I kind of learned that same thing when I got started was that I thought the same thing, and I don't know if it's like the best kept secret or the worst kept secret that triathlon is really for everybody. Anybody can do it, and that's exciting to hear. So you caught the bug, you finished that first triathlon. What was the time frame of the jump from that triathlon to finishing your first Ironman?
So that evening, I finished a triathlon. I emailed Rita and I said, thank you very much for all this information. Thank you for the
Hmm.
motivation and inspiration for getting me into the sport. She replies, you're very welcome. I'm sure we'll see you in Kona one day. So again, total ignorance towards the sport. I'm like, what does Kona have to do with triathlon? So I Googled Kona triathlon. And then I spent the next 3 hours watching Ironman videos. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, and specifically Ironman World Championship videos from Kona, Hawaii. And I'm
Hmm.
like, oh my God, this is the most incredible event in the world. I don't know how, but some way, somehow, I'm going to get to Kona. So
Hmm.
right there, the bug was planted. Steven the businessman was going to become, Steven the Iron Man, and not just Iron Man. I'm going to get to Kona some way somehow. So I approached it. Some people just like find out about Iron Man and they go after it and they get it done. I think that's a very dangerous approach.
Hmm.
I took a much more methodical and longer approach. So I said, if I'm going to do Iron Man, let me first see if I can do an Olympic distance triathlon. So I did
Yeah.
that. Then I said, let me see if I can run a half marathon. I did that. Then I said, let me try a half Ironman distance triathlon. I did that. Then I did the New York City Marathon to make sure that my body was capable of running 26 miles. So after I finished that and lived through it, then I put everything together and started training for Ironman Lake Placid in 2011. And that was my first Ironman finish. And then so 2011 is when the first Ironman occurred, and then I still had this vision of getting to the World Championship somehow, some way.
Yeah.
And there's two ways: you're either really fast and you qualify. So at every single Ironman event, and the corporation has grown so big that there's 3 or 4 Ironman races every weekend
Hmm.
these days. So either you're really fast at the top of your age group and you qualify and you get to go race with the best of the world, or Ironman has something called the Legacy Lottery Program. I call it their frequent flyer program. As long as you complete 12 full distance events within a certain time frame, you're able to get you enter this lottery, and if you're selected, you get to go and race with the 2,500 of the best athletes in the world. So there's
Yeah.
2,500 folks that qualified, including the pros that make money at this, and
Hmm.
100 lucky lottery winners. And that's the way I eventually made it to Kona. So it was from 2011, my first finish, to 2022 to crossing the finish line in Kona.
Hey everyone, I interrupt this program to introduce you to a powerful tool that will help you gain clarity on your vision and accelerate your growth and achievement. If you're listening to this show, it is likely that you have an exciting vision for your life. But the problem is that we often get caught up in the day-to-day. We get distracted, we face uncertainty, overwhelm, and self-doubt. And as a result, the gap between where you are and where you want to be seems insurmountable. And that's why I created a framework for how you can turn your vision into strategic, disciplined action that will accelerate your results in the next 90 days. I call it the Vision Reflection Retreat. It is a 2-day solo excursion designed to reignite passion and adventure into your busy life and realign your focus toward your why. This is the very same framework that I use every 90 days to reflect on my own life and my vision and set my goals for the next quarter. And it has been a game changer. And the good news is that I'm giving away this Vision Reflection Retreat guidebook for free when you sign up for my newsletter. Simply go to flowoverfear.com/retreat and download your free guide and enjoy the journey. That's amazing. And by the way, just think about to the listeners out there who are thinking about doing Ironman or thinking about the challenge that exists in there. Think about not just doing one of them, but 12 of them to get to that goal. I mean, talk about the grind. That is an incredible achievement. And coming from that, I think there's a big lesson in what you just said, Stephen, in that first part, which is you didn't just jump in like so many people do when they have this
Yeah.
big dream that is way above them. I feel like, when it comes to fear, either we look at the size of the goal and we just say, no way, I could never do that. We turn our backs on it and we leave and we just don't do it. Or we jump in too hard and we just go for like the thing and then we burn ourselves out and we don't make it. But that
Exactly.
path of taking like those that incremental growth is such a great antidote to self-doubt or lack of feeling like we could achieve it, or burning out, or that overwhelm. Just taking it one step at a time with the goal that you could see right in front of you, finishing that first triathlon, finishing that first Olympic distance, then the 70.3, and then finally the Ironman. And And by the way, Lake Placid was not the easiest Ironman to start with, for sure.
No, I mean,
I've heard
the
that
only
that's
reason
pretty
I
brutal.
picked it is because it was the closest and it didn't
Yeah.
require a lot of travel other than a 4-hour car ride.
Yeah.
But boy, is that a challenging course.
Yeah.
I would not recommend that as a first course. There's several other much flatter courses out there.
Yeah, you and I started kind of on the harder courses. I did Cabo as my first when they
That's
had the
another hard
full
one.
one. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was pretty brutal, but yeah, I and so consecutively, did it get easier? Did it get more fun? Did you kind of burn out on it over those 10 years, or did you just keep falling deeper and deeper in love with it?
No, I definitely got into the flow.
Yeah.
I loved it. And another advantage of taking the route that I took and continue to take is the lack of injuries. A lot of
Hmm.
people that get into the sport a little bit too aggressively are definitely much more injury prone. One of the chapters in my book and my motto for racing is not fast, not last.
Yeah.
I attribute the fact that I haven't had any injuries other than the cramps and sore muscles is the fact that I push myself to finish, but I don't really over exert myself for a specific finishing time because I love the journey. And
Hmm.
I mean, the destination is great. I'm there for the destination. I want to cross that finish line, but
Yeah.
I love the journey just as much. So to answer your question, I just love the flow. I love being part of the starting line. I love all the excitement and fanfare of that gun going off. 2,000 athletes hitting the water, and then 17 hours later, or however long it takes. Well, actually, 17 is the cutoff. So hopefully, less than
Yeah.
17 hours later, crossing that finish line, hating yourself for putting yourself through all this pain and agony, and then 2 days later, signing up for the next one.
Right. So when you started out, what was everyone has their biggest I guess the one sport out of the three that's like their biggest, like the most challenging, the hardest one,
Yes.
the one that people say they can't do. What was that for you?
For me, it was swimming. I mean, I
Yeah.
was never afraid of the water, but sure, I mean, because I grew up in Brighton Beach. I mean, went swimming very often, and but I did not have any form. I didn't have
Hmm.
any endurance. I did not know how. The first triathlon was 800 meters. That's 32 laps in the pool. I get
Hmm.
into the pool, I swim to the other end, and I come back, and I'm winded. I literally could not continue. I'm just
Yeah.
exhausted. I'm like, how am I going to do this 32 times? So it just persistence, and you eventually you find a rhythm. You watch a couple of YouTube videos, take a couple of lessons if you can. There's so much information out there, and you learn
Yeah.
the proper stroke. You learn how to place your head in the water. You learn how to come up for air, and then you just do that again: stroke, breathe, push, glide, stroke, push, glide, and then you eventually learn it. But that was the hardest part, and it
Hmm.
continues to be the hardest part because I'm not a fast swimmer, but I built up enough endurance that it'll get me through the 2.4 mile swim of an Ironman. I still get panic attacks because sometimes I'm just so anxious. I mean, to get
Hmm.
out there and not be left back behind at the back of the pack. I go faster than I should. I start hyperventilating. I need to stop at a buoy, hold on, catch my breath. I continue to make some rookie mistakes. Fortunately, they're
Hmm.
decreasing, but they do rear their ugly head occasionally. So long answer, swim is my weakest, and I'm continuously working on it.
Yeah, yeah, that was mine too, and still is. You're right. It never kind of goes away. You just it's so technique intensive and so
Yeah.
difficult. So tell us about Kona, because you got there on the Legacy after finishing 12 races. You got into the lottery. What was Kona like? How was it for you?
You know what? It was everything I ever envisioned it would be.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of envisioning things and envisioning the finish line and envisioning the journey. Um, I I didn't manifest this. Obviously, I made this happen because I put through all the grit grind.
Right.
I got there, but in my mind, I was there 100 times already. I've
Hmm.
watched every video available on YouTube about Kona. I watch every single world champ because the world championship is televised every year on NBC. I've
Hmm.
watched ever since I learned about it. I've watched it every single year. I've repeatedly watched the same exact event just to see what these athletes are doing. So in my mind, I was there a couple of hundred times. So when I got there, it was just surreal. From the moment we landed, driving down that highway, the Queen K Highway, which is where the bike course is, and like making a right to Alihi Drive, which is where our hotel is, and Alihi Drive is the famous finishing line
Hmm.
for the run. And I'm looking around. I swear it was literally like walking through my old neighborhood in Brooklyn, which obviously I recognize every single street and I know every single nook and cranny. I felt like
Yeah.
I knew every single nook and cranny of this course and of this town because in my mind, the mind is incapable of telling the difference between something actually happening and a really, really good visualization of that event.
Hmm.
So if you become really good at meditating, and I'm not talking about expert level meditation, I'm talking about maybe like 101, 102 level meditation, you can really start visualizing things. And that's a phenomenal tool for goal setting because once your
Hmm.
mind starts visualizing things, you're subconsciously programming yourself to start doing things towards that goal. So yeah, Kona for any triathlete that's listening, and if you have Kona on your bucket list, keep grinding, keep working at it. It is so worth it.
Yeah, well, I 100% agree, and there's something truly magical about that place, about Kona. And I mean, I share a lot of the feelings that you do about just, going there and just feeling the energy, seeing the sights and recognizing them and just being a part of it. And I hope that
Mm-hmm.
if anybody at Ironman is listening, they don't take that away from the triathletes that are trying to get there because it is so magical. And I really like what you said there about the visualizing through meditating, because visualization that was a big element for me too of in my triathlon journey, was visualizing those finish lines. Can you talk a little bit about your visualization practice, what that looks like? How can people implement that in their own lives?
Sure. I mean, the visualization actually helped me a lot with my company sale as well.
Hmm.
When I started taking the sale process seriously, I actually wrote a check out to myself for a very large amount of money, and I pasted it in front of my computer. Right. So that I had two things hanging in front of my computer that I saw all day, every day: a check made out to myself and an Ironman World Championship poster.
I love
So
it.
and I thought about that all the time. Basically you get into a meditative state. And it's really not that hard. It sounds like some people that don't meditate think it's a complicated process. It really just involves being in a quiet place with the lights off, usually, your
Hmm.
eyes closed. 5 to 10 super deep breaths will get you into a zone. And again, I'm not a meditation expert. I'm not up to speed on all of the exact vocabulary and terminology. So I apologize to
Hmm.
all the meditate gurus out there. But 5 or 10 super deep breaths with your eyes closed, and literally just start imagining what it is you're striving for, whether it's the finish line of a 5K, a 10K, a half marathon, the sale of your company, the completion of a project, the launch of a new product, a graduation event. The list goes on and on and on. Just put yourself there, and you'd be amazed at how your body starts programming itself to make the right decisions towards that goal.
Man, that's so helpful. That's such great advice to people out there, because man, it's easy to get caught up in the day to day and just kind of lose sight of that where we want to go so often. So, is that a practice you still do daily in terms of, or is there a frequency at which you do that?
Oh, 100%. I don't
Yeah,
do it daily, but I do it at least a couple of times a week. I still have goals. Um,
yeah.
I continue to set large goals, and it's worked. It's worked to achieving the sale of the company and the Ironman World Championship. So I'm hoping it could. I not hoping. I know it will continue to work. I'm going forward.
Yeah. So how is Ironman like entrepreneurship? I mean, this is really kind of the framework of your book, Built to Finish. Like,
Sure.
how you have kind of these endurance things, but what are some of the, just like, if you could summarize that into three key, you know, things that where Ironman is like, or endurance sport is like entrepreneurship, what would you say those are?
Um, Planning and preparation, I put them into one. Both
Hmm.
are incredible. Like they're key to both. I mean, entrepreneurship is an endurance sport. So if you want to be successful in a race or in your business, planning and preparation for every step of the way is super important. Execution, right? So you put the plan together for a reason. Don't wing it from there. Execute the plan. There's going to be pivots. There's going to be setbacks. You're going to have to take detours, but which is totally fine. You should plan for those as well, and just execute accordingly. And then measurement. I can't stress enough from a business perspective how few entrepreneurs take measurements and KPIs religiously. I did it at first, and it really wasn't until I started racing and started really measuring, my swim speeds, my bicycle pace, my running pace and strokes and all that jazz. And I started measuring that maniacally to make sure I was going to get to the finish. I started measuring things better at work and having my team measure things better at work. And we really started becoming a little bit more maniacal, actually a lot more maniacal about KPIs and reports and quarterly statements. So those are, I guess, if I had to only stick to three, those would be the three things that I would say are synonymous to each other in, of course, both disciplines.
Yeah, that's so good. I mean, the planning, execution, measurement, and I know a lot of people maybe do really well with the planning part, but maybe not so great at the execution part, maybe not so great at the measurement part. And part of this show, is obviously we want to help people to get over fears and to recognize where fear might be an obstacle in their life, but ultimately get into that flow or get into discipline, and be a disciplined person. What are some of the things and tools that you use in addition to visualization, or things that you've learned that help you get into that flow, that keep you going, that keep you disciplined on the path to being in that grind?
I mean, I think accountability partners is huge in everything, both from a business perspective and from an endurance perspective. I always had an accountability partner, whether it be a coach that's helping me along the way, or whether it's somebody that's doing it with me. It becomes, so much easier to get things done. I mean, everybody always says it's 10 times easier to go to the gym if you have a friend waiting for you. That is so true. I mean, I work out all the time. If I have somebody waiting for me, and I know whether I be a person or a group, that workout is 10 times easier to start. Workouts are hard to start. Workouts aren't hard to complete. They are hard to start. When you have somebody waiting for you, you will start 99% of the time. So I've used accountability partners and coaches throughout, and I continue to, because it's just a great tool.
I love that. I like recognize where the biggest obstacle to moving forward is. And if it's the start, if you can, accountability partners help you to start. I love that. That's such good advice. Now, talking about the book, I want to transition into the book. What can you just talk a little bit about it, what it's about? We talked a little bit about, it is your story and how you're relating it, entrepreneurship, to the endurance sport. But yeah, tell us a little bit about that and how we can go about finding it.
Sure. I just got my first copy, so it's
nice. It's there. It's in real life.
There it is.
I love it.
Yeah. So thank you for bringing it up. Yeah, it's called Built to Finish. When I started putting it together, one of the many challenges of writing a book is coming up with a title. And I started, I knew that I wanted to compare and contrast entrepreneurship to endurance sports. And I also wanted to talk about a lot of the lessons learned and some tips and tricks and some pitfalls that, I encountered along the way. And it just kind of, came to us that, there's a finish line. In the business world, the finish line is the exit, right? Whether it's going public, selling to a strategic, getting a majority recap from a private equity firm, that's the finish line for an entrepreneur. And it's just a new phase starts, but that's the finish line. And obviously in racing, there's a finish line for the event, or there's the top of a mountain in the mountaineering world. So I just felt like, Built to Finish was a great title. And again, like I mentioned, it talks about, like you asked for three things that are similar, but it talks about many other things. There's planning, preparation, perseverance, execution, pivot, setbacks, stamina, perseverance. There's so many similarities that entrepreneurship has to endurance sports, that the book kind of just takes the reader on two journeys. And I tried to talk about, because they actually happen at the same time. They're only 1 year apart. My Ironman Kona finish line was exactly 1 year after, 1 year and 1 month after the sale of the company. So
Oh,
the
wow.
timeline was, finishing one Ironman after the next and preparing the
Yeah.
company for the sale was happening together. So the book really takes the reader on two journeys, on culminating in the finish of both.
Yeah. Well, I'm really glad that you wrote a book that's addressing that, and from the perspective of someone who is used to the grind, used to, and has tremendous success in business and tremendous success in endurance sport. Because one of the things, I mean, I think that we can all realize, one of the best kept secrets that needs to get out there is that, endurance sport can translate into a lot of areas in our life, business, into our relationships, into our family, if we let it, if we do it in the right way. And it's such a powerful lesson. I learned that lesson too. And I mean, it changed my life, and it clearly changed yours.
Yeah.
And I would suggest just anyone who's listening to this, pick up that book, learn how it can do that. And especially if you are, looking to achieve something greater in your life, if you have a vision for something that is way bigger than where you're at now, read about someone who achieved it and also can translate that into the endurance sport, and your life is going to transform. And you could do that just by reading a book and getting in touch with Steven on that. So Steven, where can you're speaking, you're consulting now, you've got a book that's going to take off and blow the world up. Where can people find you and get in touch with you if they want to learn more?
Thank you for all those compliments.
Yeah.
The book's available on Amazon. The book is also available where books are sold, in Barnes & Noble and other retailers. If you want to contact me, easiest way to do so is via my website, stevenpivnik.com. My email address is there. My LinkedIn profile is there, whether it's an email directly to me, via LinkedIn. I'm always happy to chat with other folks, pursuing some sort of endurance path or an entrepreneurial journey.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Steven. And I'm so glad I got to know you. It's just such a thrill to see how successful you become, where you're going. And I'm really looking forward to seeing you on a stage somewhere sometime, and really hearing that story. Because one of the things that's a little frustrating to me, honestly, is that we took this 6 month course together, and we were never in the same cohort, so I could see you speak. So I'm looking forward to that day when I could see you on stage speaking and sharing your story. I'm excited about that.
No, same here. I mean, it was a pleasure meeting you, and I love the fact that we're on this next chapter together. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Well, to everyone else out there, if you got a lot from this show, and you know of someone who may be experiencing some of the struggles or challenges, or is doing some soul searching on this front, share this episode with them so that maybe they can get something from that. And thank you for joining us today. Thank you for listening to this. And Steven, thank you so much for being here. Everybody get Steven's new book, Built to Finish, and check him out at stevenpivnik.com. And thank you so much for joining us today. We will see you next time. Thank you so much for joining me today on Flow Over Fear. If you are liking this show, please do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. That way you'll be first to know when I drop a new episode, including interviews or trainings or dad jokes. That's right, dad jokes. Add a little levity to your life. And if you liked this episode in particular, and you think somebody can get something from it, please share it with a friend. And that way we'll spread the message together. Thanks again for joining me today. See you next time.